To Stan, as promised now, to get a look at the local markets from IG in Melbourne. Stan, good to see you there again. US dollar, it seemed like it just came back to life. Was there any particular catalyst for that?
Yeah, absolutely. That is the case at the moment. Of course, we had the home sales data, and as well we had that manufacturing PMI data that came in better than expected. It certainly seems like investors continue to reprice these QE tapering expectations, and as soon as we get a positive print, this seems to be a reason for investors to get back into the US dollar, and of course this generally weighs on the rest of the risk space. Now of course we also had some pretty good sentiment out of Europe with the PMIs there, services and manufacturing coming out a little bit better than expected, but still in that contractionary territory, so still below 50, so that's still a bit of a concern, although in the short term I think it certainly gave some relief to European equities, but with the US dollar looking like it's a bit elevated at the moment, we did see the euro lose some ground eventually in US trade, along with the Aussie dollar, and of course the biggest beneficiary was the dollar yen, which pushed back above that 100 level. But certainly for the Aussie dollar, it looks like it's in for a tough week. Of course, we've already seen it drop significantly from that 93.20 level where it topped out following the CPI numbers yesterday, and of course with China data disappointing and with the US dollar a little bit stronger, it looks like we might be eyeing that a retest of that 90 level in the near term for the Aussie dollar. Of course we printed that low on July the 12th, and we feel that's where we might start to see some support, and possibly we might see it a little bit range bound as we test that support, and of course as traders try and assess what's happening with the RBA going forward.
Bit of hawkish sounding commentary from the RBNZ as well, so that New Zealand dollar is doing pretty well. What about the risk space? Anything in that gives us a bit of a steer on how risk will fare today?
Yeah, I think with most of the commodities, they were weighed on quite heavily by the stronger US dollar. We had a pretty big drop in oil and gold, along with copper, which was down about 0.4%. So it looks like the risk space will be in for a fairly tough day today. Of course, we had Caterpillar as well downgrading 2013 earnings, just tipping that drop off in demand from the mining space as the main catalyst for that downgrade. So that should be quite negative for the risk space, particularly the mining services companies locally, and of course some of the miners themselves. But of course with the miners it might be a bit of a kicker, because it really does show that some of their cost-cutting initiatives as they look to bolster profit and of course margins are starting to pay off, and potentially that they are executing them, and this might be a bit of a positive for them going forward. But for now it certainly seems like it'll be a negative for the risk space.
All right, so particularly when you look at, say, Caterpillar's earnings, what's the direct flow through for us today in terms of stocks that might be impacted by that, or maybe even other sectors or stocks you're watching today?
Yeah, we were watching stocks like Seven Group, and of course the likes of Monadelphous, Worley Parsons. Of course those are the bigger companies that service some of the biggest resource companies in the world. Of course we have gone through a pretty big downgrade cycle for a lot of these mining services companies, so this won't come as too big a surprise, but perhaps the fact that Caterpillar, which tends to be a pretty good bellwether for some of these names, has come out with this downgrade might mean that maybe the downgrade cycle for some of these mining services companies is not over, and potentially this might see investors use recent strength as an opportunity to sell again, and this might continue to weigh on names like Monadelphous and Worley Parsons heading into today's trade. So far we are calling the Aussie market a little bit higher, just 0.1% to 5,040. Of course, yesterday we had a pretty big reversal from that China data, so that was quite negative, so we would have priced in some of the weakness we saw in US trade. But at the same time, I think that strength in European equities is helping offset some of the weakness from the US. But certainly it seems like the resources are in for a tough day. We've got BHP's ADR pointing down 0.5%. We also have, of course, the likes of Newcrest and Oz Minerals coming out with some production reports today, and following that there's weakness in gold and copper, they might come under pressure. But with Newcrest, it certainly seems like a lot of the bad news has been out of the way now. And of course, with some of their recent cost-cutting initiatives, maybe this might help the stock continue its little run-up and potentially test $15 in the short term. But of course, we also had Aquarius Platinum posting its results at the end of yesterday's session, and their stock was up about 1% in London trade. So this might help it out in today's session locally. Of course, the stock experienced a lower platinum group of metals prices by about 6%, but I think their production for the quarter was actually up about 8%, so it looks like they might be in for a pretty good run in the short term. We also have Macquarie's AGM today. It certainly seems like the investment banks are coming back to life. We had pretty good earnings from some of their US peers. And of course, their operating environment from an investment bank perspective seems to have improved a little bit. So we might see Macquarie's prospects continue to improve in the short term.
Thank you so much for the outlook for today. Stan Shamu from IG in Melbourne.
Cheers, Brooke.
And coming up, strained relations. The political developments from this morning, the call from the BCA to get serious when it comes to productivity, saying the government is just full of inaction. We're back in a moment.
Bougez, bougez. Bougez, bougez. Bougez, bougez.